Ellie Milan never thought about or had an opinion about God until she died of alcohol poisoning at the age of 15. Was she in for a harsh awakening, or was God very different than what she expected? Watch today's episode to find out. Please share a comment in support of Ellie sharing her story. And if you've had a profound spiritual experience that you would like to share on the show, you'll find the link to apply in the description box. Thank you for watching. Let's start off with your NDE. Could you share with us anything leading up to your NDE that's relevant to the story? And then we can get into your NDE.
Sure. I was a absolutely rotten teenager, not the kind of teenager any mother would hope for. I was mouthy, sassy, prideful, super lost. It was all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I lied, I snuck out, I did all the things. Me and my friends stole a car once, like naughty. I was naughty. At a pretty young age. I got started at age 12. So yeah, so 12 for 14 through 14, 15 was pretty crazy.
Very interesting. Did you have like any kind of spiritual or religious background or beliefs at that point in your life?
No, not at all. I wouldn't say I was atheist or anything. I had like literally no opinion about God. I
Yeah.
didn't think about God. We didn't talk about God in my house. Neither of my parents were spiritual or religious. My dad is Greek, and so all Greeks living in, who grew up in Greece are Greek Orthodox. And so it's like, technically he's a Christian, I suppose, by culture, but not in an actual, not in actuality. And my mom, in college, she grew up Episcopalian, and then in college she sort of, left that, got into kind of like some weird ideas about different things. I don't know. I didn't grow up with it. So my only encounter with anything I can trace back that would be a connection with God was two things. One, Santa Claus, which you know, looking back is just bad, but I was just taken by the fact that Santa Claus could be everywhere all the time, was omniscient, omnipotent, and, omnipresent. And that, really struck me, and I believed it. I guess I was a child of faith. I put my whole faith in, that Santa Claus was real. And so when I found out, probably in the second grade, maybe, that he wasn't real, I was absolutely crushed. And I think it just because of that experience, I never told my kids that Santa was real because I didn't want them to, you know, because I raised my kids that God was real. So if I'm telling them God is real, and then he's not, you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. I didn't like that. And then the next connection was with reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And so I probably was in the fourth grade or so, third grade, I don't know, when I read that. And it just gripped my heart. And I just cried and cried when Aslan was on the table and that whole scene was happening. And looking back at the time, I didn't make the connection, but looking back and how deeply it impacted me, I see now what that was all about. And so I always had this feeling or this thought growing up that first it was Santa Claus was watching me all the time, so be good for Santa, or this feeling that you're not alone, and that there's something there with us. And then after I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I was performing for Aslan. I was, aware, like if it had to be something or an imaginary friend or whatever, it was Aslan was there. So, a little weird, but then yeah, at 15, that was that when I had this experience, that would be my first like actual real encounter with the living God.
You had like this openness and interest in spiritual things, but not like a solid religious or spiritual background. And then we're having some issues as a teenager, which many children do. And then what happened that led up to your NDE?
Well, I was 15 and I went out with some friends. My brother is older, he's 2.5 years older. And we were out with his friends and a couple of my friends. And we were at this park and they were going to go to a nightclub. And like I had a fake ID to get into the nightclub. So we were going to do that later. And so we were drinking in this park. And I had never heard of 151 Bacardi, like this really high proof alcohol. I'd never heard of it, didn't know anything about it. And it's really ironic and strange, but these friends of my brother, so my brother and a couple of his friends go to the nightclub, and me and my friends are there with a couple of his friends. And they were, they had this sort of spoof or this sarcastic thing that they would always do, that they were a part of the Ronald McDonald religion. It probably came because they would go to McDonald's after school or whatever, and it became their religion. And so they were priests and religious leaders of this cult. Ronald McDonald cult. So they were saying, "Oh, it's time for communion." And so we were like laying on the hood of the car with our mouths tipped back, and they were pouring the 151 Bacardi into our mouth. And I guess because I was trying to impress them, I'm this young teenager. Everybody else was kind of spitting it out and like gagging, and I was trying to be cool and like actually like drink it. And so obviously I drank too much. And that's kind of the last thing I remember as far as my perspective. But what ended up happening is not too long after that, completely knocked out. And they all wanted to go to the nightclub and have fun and meet up with everybody else. So they locked me in the car. And so I'm passed out in this car in this park. And then they go into the nightclub and they run into my brother. And he's like, "Where's my sister?" And they said, "Oh, she's passed out in the car." And he's like, "What? You left her locked in the car." So he goes back to the park, sees me in the car, and he knew something wasn't right. And so he pinched my cheek and I didn't flinch, and he pulled my tongue out and it stayed out. And so that's when he knew something was really wrong. And so he called my parents, thank God. And they were like, "Call an ambulance." So I'm now being sent to this hospital, and I arrive in a coma, and they gave me charcoal, pumped my stomach, had respirators, all the tubes. And they told my mom my blood alcohol level was 0.46, which is really high. And for my size, that like normally that you wouldn't live through that. So they told my mom that I probably wouldn't make it. And so she, not religious, spiritual, or anything. She didn't know what to do other than she needed a miracle. And so she did the only thing she knew to do. And she called a Greek Orthodox priest. She didn't have a relationship with this priest or anything, but it was just her. I don't even know how she got the number or what, but anyway, she calls this priest, and he came to the hospital and prayed with her. And so next thing I know, it's like into the next afternoon. It was around 4 something in the afternoon. And I kind of I wake up and I'm like gagging and coughing, and there's all these tubes. And so they pulled the tubes out, and they were surprised, that I woke up. It took them by surprise. And so then it was just this process of trying to like figure out what happened to me, and my mom crying, and it was very emotional. And she's, telling me what transpired and what happened. So of course I'm like, man, I'm in big trouble. And I felt super guilty. Mostly what I initially felt was just guilt, and how could I put my mom through this? And my parents are both still married. So, but I don't know. My dad wasn't there. Maybe he was at work, or I don't know. And I just felt like tremendously guilty. And then I was like super sick. And, I had like severe alcohol poisoning. So that sticks with you for a while. And so it was after I got home from the hospital that I actually remembered the dream. And it just dropped suddenly. It wasn't like, I don't remember anything triggering it. I just like all of a sudden I remembered this dream. And so I don't honestly know when I had the dream, but it felt like it definitely happened in the hospital because I remembered it before I slept at my own house. But I don't know when in the hospital. And I'm assuming it happened when I was in the coma, but just based on the dream. But that might not be true. I don't know. So yeah, then the dream, I'm assuming I should say what the dream is. That's like the most important part.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. If you've been feeling disconnected from spirit, disconnected from divine love, I have an offering for you. I now offer one-on-one energy work sessions. It's my very favorite work that I've ever done. I completely rebalance your energy field and give you a transfusion of divine love and healing energy for any specific area of need, and follow it up with feedback on what I find in your energy field, a little bit of spiritual coaching, and simple takeaway practices that you can take into your life and implement to help you cultivate a deep connection with divine love. I offer 30-minute sessions, 45-minute sessions, and I'm currently offering 50% off on my 4-session package. Check the link in the description to sign up. Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
So I had this dream that I'm in a subway underground and I'm all alone and I can kind of hear the subway coming and anyway, and it's like super cold and dirty and smelly and there's garbage blowing and I remember like this newspaper kind of wraps around my legs and I wanted to get away and run but I couldn't. My legs were like stuck to the ground and this train was coming or the subway was coming and it was making just this horrible like noise, and it was getting louder and louder and faster and faster. And there was this like extreme frantic energy and it was just like coming towards me. And it got so loud and so frantic. And I couldn't run. I just closed my eyes and it just felt like it kind of blew through me. And so then once it had passed, I started floating down the subway to this light, this really bright light. And I'm at the end and I'm on the edge of a cliff. And I look below and maybe 15 feet, 20 feet, something below me is just this misty kind of clouds and then this crystal clear, beautiful water. And it was just so inviting. And so I just turned around and fell in it. And I could just feel the warmth of the water. And it was just like the purest form of love. And until that moment in time, even though my mom loves me, my dad loves me, my brother, like I had family that cared for me, I had never known love like that. It redefined love and like completely indescribable. And it was not only love, just and such a deep, like ancient, forever type love, unconditional to the max. It was also this like acceptance. Like it doesn't even matter what you've done or who you are or what's inside of you. You are so loved. And it just like I knew it was God and it just kind of enveloped me everywhere. And that's kind of all I remember of the dream. And but it was extremely powerful and it like changed my life forever. And yeah, so that's the story.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm curious, you've mentioned that it's a dream, and then in your video that you posted, I think you called it an NDE in the title. Do you believe that it was just a dream that you had during the coma, or do you think that you were really there?
There's no telling. I don't think there's a way to know. It certainly didn't feel like other dreams. It was much more visceral. It was much more real and less like symbolic, more literal, I guess. I mean, I guess the train's kind of symbolic, but I mean, normally when I have dreams, even when they mean something, it's like you see everything's kind of this metaphor. But that water really did feel like not that God is water, but like God was in the water. I mean, like it was God, So I I don't know, and I don't know that it totally matters 100%, and I don't know that I would ever know. It's just it was an experience for sure. And I absolutely, it was definitely near death in that, I wasn't supposed to live through that. And they didn't think I would wake up from the coma. And, you know, that's what they told my parents.
Do you have any thoughts on what the train was meant to symbolize?
What it felt like was like the track I was on, and it was just the opposite of what I experienced in the water. It was just this like frantic, chaotic energy and complete lack of control. Like I had no will. And whereas getting into the water, I made that. I willed myself. I made the decision to get in the water, and so it just felt like the train to me symbolized the most icky, awful, chaotic, out of control. You're there's nothing you can do about it feeling. And I think it symbolized like where I was at, in my life. And if I kept going down that track, it wouldn't have been good.
How did this experience affect your life as a 15-year-old, having an experience where you almost die and then remembering this really profound dream that seemed to have a message for you about where your life was heading? How did you process that?
Well, I think the whole time of my life was super emotional. I mean, like any 15-year-old girl is constantly, you know, crying and laughing and crying and like you're
Yes.
all over the place. So I'm already that. And so then something like this happened. I think the for me personally, I mean there was a lot of things related to family and like just the guilt, but then once I remembered the dream, I connected this like unconditional love. Like it was like no matter what I do, it doesn't give me license to do it, but no matter how bad I've been to my parents or ungrateful or prideful or whatever my faults are, like God, who made everything, loves me anyway. That was extremely comforting, and it alleviated the guilt to some degree and kind of churned the guilt into like this desire to do better, but not beat myself up over what I've done kind of thing. And so, but for me personally, it gave me purpose because I really believed at the time, and I still believe that I was preserved for a reason. And I believe everybody has purpose and destiny and greatness in them. I'm not special in that way, but for whatever reason, could have just been my mom crying out to God. I mean, I don't know, but I was preserved. And so it always gave me this tremendous responsibility and feeling like, Ellie, do something with your life. Don't just live a mediocre life. Don't allow fear or excuses or laziness or anything to block you from your destiny. You got a second chance. You got an opportunity to actually live out your destiny, and you need to do it and not, make excuses, which is so easy to do. So that I got, and I started searching. And I found art shortly after that. A lot of things happened in my 15th year. I mean, that's when I found God. That's when I found, art. That's when my purpose and destiny all aligned, and I knew what I was going to do with my life. I mean, that all happened in the same year. And so it set me in motion to seek that and to look for that and to really care about that and have this like ultimate power source to call on that I knew cared about me, that I knew loved me because I had an encounter with that love. And so it was so easy to understand God loves me, God cares about me. There's a reason I'm here, and surely he's going to tell me what that is. And I believe he did, So it all kind of came together around the same time.
Amazing. Thank you again for sharing. And I would love to dive into what you just said a little more if you're comfortable with that. You mentioned that you
Yeah.
found God and you found art all during your 15th year. Would you like to share how you found God, obviously through your experience, but what did that look like after you came back to this life?
Well, I didn't have really a theology or a set of established doctrine or set of beliefs to stick that because I wasn't raised with that. At the time, if you asked me what a Christian was, I would have had no clue. So I had no idea who Jesus was. I had no idea, I knew that was God and I knew God was love. I knew what God's love felt like because I experienced it. But then, and it wasn't like I was going to lose the connection, I don't think, but I didn't know what to call it or how to conceptualize it. And so, and it was fairly private. I didn't even know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to, I told my mom the dream, and obviously she thought it was cool and agreed, yeah, that's God, and then, but she, in her perspective, she cried out to God, asked God for help, and God came through for her. So that got her thinking about God on a different level than previous. She didn't really have a connection with God before that. So this whole experience got my mom in that track. And so shortly thereafter, this is her story. She said that she was like, I am the world's worst mother. My daughter is, wayward and I am completely lost. I need to figure out how to parent a teenager. And so she was at the mall and there's this Christian bookstore she said she always avoided and would like go on the other side of the stores, to avoid it. And she felt like somebody was going to like jump out of the store and like grab her and make her go to their church or something. So she always avoided it. And she said just this one day while she was thinking about like what a bad parent she was, the store sort of called to her. And so she went in it looking for in the parenting section for a book and thinking, okay, I'm gonna get a book on parenting in here. And she didn't buy one of those, but she saw on the shelf, this is pretty crazy. She saw on the shelf this book, and it was called The Holy Spirit in You by Father Bennett. And that happened to be the Episcopal priest that she grew up with. And
Oh,
so she
wow.
was, yeah, so she was like, what? Like the priest I grew up with wrote a book. And then she found these other books that he had written. So she got two of them. And the other one was called 9 o'clock in the morning. And so she read both those books. And I saw a huge change in her. Suddenly, that was not my mother. And she was like happy and joyful. And because she used to be just like angry and I don't know, sarcastic and just always had like something negative to say, super negative. And so to see her like happy and joyful was like a total transformation. So it got me kind of curious and interested. What's the change? So she told me about these books. So then I didn't read both of them, but I read one of the books and that put it all in context. And a lot of what that book talked about was God's love. And I was like, oh, that's what that was. I mean, I knew it was God's love, but it was it's a Christian book and it put it in context. So it gave me this understanding of everything and talked a lot about Jesus and who Jesus is. And that's how I became a Christian, is basically through reading a book.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's just amazing the synchronicities that happen when God is leading you down a particular path, like the fact that the bishop, I'm sorry, what was it, a bishop that she grew up with? I forget
Like a priest, an
the
Episcopal
priest,
priest. Yeah.
yeah, that he wrote a book and there it was in the bookstore on that specific day.
Yeah.
I would also like to ask you about your journey with art. You said you discovered art the same year.
Yeah. So as I'm sort of like trying to think of my purpose in life, because I was like, I mean, like teenagers are very, now I'm obviously an adult and a little more tempered, but like as a teenager, I think like you always think you're the star of the show a little bit, And so this whole like, wow, I was supposed to die and I didn't. I'm special, played into that teenager mindset. So I was like really thinking, I got to figure out why I'm here. Like there's a big reason, and it's like every movie you've ever watched on that subject starts to like come to mind. And so I was really, sort of secretly, I really, from that point on until I was probably late 20s, had a secret desire for greatness that I would never admit to anyone. It was like shameful and arrogant to admit that to anybody, but it was like, I think it sort of started then. I mean, now I'm totally over that, but and I believe everybody has greatness in them, but at that time it's like I could feel this seed of greatness kind of growing and brewing. And so I was looking for something, and I kept thinking, I'm decent at this and I'm decent at that, but I'm really not great at anything. I'm just like I'm good at some stuff, but I'm not really great at anything. And so I kind of wanted like a talent or a gift or a something to be great at. And so I was asking God for that. And shortly after, I mean, not even a week or two later, in my high school, I was in an art class, like ninth grade art class, and they had Betty Edwards. I don't know if you know who she is. She wrote the book Drawing from the Right Side of the Brain. She's
Oh,
passed on now,
yes.
but back then in the 80s, she was, her book had been out a few years, and she was touring around promoting her book. And so she did a workshop at our school, and and so I'm in this class, and it's like a 3-day workshop, and she took us through all these exercises to like turn on our right brain and engage our right brain. And it totally worked. Like I picked up on it like right away. And within 3 days, I could draw what I could look at, and basically using these techniques or the right brain method. And so I drew this drawing of Marilyn Monroe, and I showed my mom this drawing of Marilyn Monroe, and she's like, "You didn't draw that. There's no way you drew that." Because I mean, I couldn't draw a stick figure before, and I was like, "No, no, we took this workshop, Eddie Edwards, right brain, and I can draw it." And she's like, "I don't believe you. One of your friends did that." And so she ripped out this portrait from a magazine of this guy, and she says, "Okay, if you drew that, then go draw this guy." So I went to my room and I drew him and I gave it back to her. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, you have a gift. You're talented," And so then I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm special. I have this gift." And so yeah, then I was all interested in art, and then I converted my study halls into an independent study on art. And the art teacher, who is a ceramicist, she wasn't a painter. She didn't know much about painting. She's like, "I can't really help you with painting, but here's the supply closet. Go to town, have fun. Here's the directions and how to stretch a canvas. Here's some paint. Here's this, here's that." So I spent months in there just playing around with things. And then I managed to stretch a canvas, a big canvas. It was a 30 by 40. And I did my first real painting on there, besides little studies of like an apple or a ball or whatever. And it looking back, it's not a good painting. It's I actually have a YouTube video about this and the actual painting, and then I recreated the painting, my first painting, recently. And so there's a story about that, or a YouTube video about that. So I did this painting of these two girls, these two women, and it's not that good, but I was very proud of it. And I decided I was going to give it to my dad for his birthday. And I was super nervous because my dad is like super macho Greek man, and he is the type of guy that can make you or break you with his words, and he doesn't watch his words. So he can be really cruel, sort of accidentally, or he can just like say something and you just are like, "Oh." So I wanted to give it to him, but I was super nervous because this is really special to me, this newfound, talent. And so I heard him coming home, the day I was going to give it to him, and I had it there waiting, and he's kind of walking up the steps, and I can hear his keys and the doors opening, and I'm getting so nervous, and my heart's just in my throat, and I can hardly stand it. And he comes over to me, and I said, "Hey, I have a birthday present for you I made." And so I turned the painting around, and his eyes just opened, his mouth dropped, and I could see tears actually like welling up in his eyes. And then he got super embarrassed and he just grabbed the painting and ran up to his room. And then I ran to my room and I just started bawling because I knew it gripped his heart somehow. And it just showed me like the power of art and how incredible it is. And I was like, if I can make my dad cry, like this is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I just told God, if you turn me into an artist, I will do that for the rest of my life to serve you. And so yeah, that's how I basically decided in my heart that day I was going to be an artist.
What an incredible story. And I love hearing about your passion behind it and the reason why you wanted to do it. Do you want to show us? Do you have any pieces that you could show us?
I mean, this painting here is mine. You know, I can send you a bunch of art and I don't know, you could
Yeah.
do
Put
it
it on the
digitally. I
screen.
can't think of
Yeah.
any way I can think of doing is pretty clunky. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to. Send me some and I'll put them up on the screen. Would you like to share with people where they can find you and where they can learn more about your art?
Yeah, so I'm here on YouTube, Ellie Milan, and I'm sure there will be a link in the description or something. And then, you know, on Instagrams and then my website. So Ellie Milan you can find, you know, just about anywhere, Facebook, all the places, TikTok. And then I also own an art school. So that happened in 2010. We opened an art school specifically to help other artists step into their destiny and be able to become professional artists because it's not just me that can create art that can really grip somebody's heart or bring transformation or revelation. It's all the artists, right? So our school is basically dedicated to that, to help artists build skill in what they're doing, because it requires skill, then to find their voice and what is their personal art style and what is it they want to say. And that's a whole like, you know, personal journey of self-discovery, and then how to build a portfolio, market and sell their artwork and build a marketing strategy for that. So our school is called Milan Art Institute. My daughter she became a professional artist at age 15 and was super successful from her first year. She sold, and it's interesting, 15, you know, we both had these incredible things happen to us at age 15, and it repeated with her, but not in the sort of negative way as mine. Hers was ultra positive, and she sold over $1 million of her artwork in galleries all over her first year. So she had this just huge start. And so she and I and my husband and her husband own the school together, and it's called Milan Art Institute. And it's online worldwide and also YouTube, website, Instagram, you know, all the places.
Are you comfortable sharing your daughter's name?
Oh, yeah, Dimitra Milan.
I follow her. Oh wow, this is
Oh,
I like because I look up art tutorial videos when I'm doing my paintings, and she had popped up. She has some ads running now that are just incredible. I was actually considering taking a couple of those classes, so that must actually be your website I was going to.
oh, yeah, yeah. So, well, she has some great stories, and I mean, of course, I'm her mom, but she's, you know, a very lovely person.
Thank you so much for being willing to share about your experience, Ellie. I want to close out by asking you two questions that I ask all of my guests. The first one is that love that you experienced and your dream or NDE. Is there a way that people can experience that or get a taste of that here while in this life?
Totally. Yeah, I have experienced that many times, you know, since. And I think once you know what the presence of God feels like, I think almost everybody has experienced at some point in their life the presence of God and had God encounters. But you don't know what it's all about or what that connection is or how to like pursue it more. And I believe God's always pursuing us. He's always wooing us and showing his love to us. And, God is good. He's not angry and trying to, you know, about guilt and shame and any of that. God's all about love, acceptance, and, a higher level of living, and it's experiential and it's for today. And I think, God is powerful, and there's many ways to get there, of course. I mean, you could read a book, you could go to church, you could talk to somebody, sure, but the best way is to just talk to God and just ask God. And God is God, so surely he's capable of telling you who he is. And so if you really desire a connection, an experience with God, just ask him for it and watch what happens. It'll be pretty profound and amazing.
Beautiful. And my final question is, if you could give one message to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
Oh, that is a Mac Daddy question. You know, my probably number one thing that I live for is that everybody has a purpose and a destiny, and everybody is significant and has greatness inside of them, and you were born for a reason, and you have a very special, singular, unique story and assignment, purpose, destiny to carry out that only you can fulfill and no one else. And God is there for you to help you fulfill that and give you, if you need resources, if you need people or a community or a way, God will make the way. And so I would just want everybody to know that if they lean into that and they press into that and they desire that, it will absolutely happen for them. And that little whisper of greatness that they've felt inside of them is real. And that is just the beginning.
Thank you so much for watching. My guests' links can be found in the description box. If you have had a near-death experience, pre-birth experience, out-of-body experience, past or between life memories, or spiritual awakening story that you would like to share, find the link to apply in the description box. If you would like to support the channel, we have a few fun ways that you can do that. I do have a merch store linked in the description. We've put some of the phrases on t-shirts that you guys requested. I have affiliate links to my favorite blue blockers, my favorite red light panel, and a couple of other companies that I work with. You can join my membership at the Sanctuary. You can sign up for an energy healing. I also offer a 4-session energy healing package. You'll find all these links in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support. Now go live your most extravagantly loving life.